Right. I would like to welcome Karen Sketch, and I'm sorry, I'm probably saying that wrong again, Karen.
No worries, you're doing great.
Tell me your last name again.
Szczech.
Shell?
Szczech.
Shell. She will be presenting on large room music, also known as chamber music, which is an essential part in any musician's career path. This presentation will focus on the importance of collaboration with other individuals, other instruments, and new ideas. In addition, there will be a discussion on how we can provide ourselves and other musicians opportunities to expand our own chamber music palette and the audiences that are listening. Karen is a violinist. She is a first-generation Polish American from Chicago, Illinois, receiving her bachelor's degree in violin performance, a minor in psychology, and completing her Suzuki method training at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. She continued her musical studies, completing a master's degree in violin performance from University of Wisconsin-Madison. I don't know if all of you were aware of this, but when you go on the CAMTA website and you click to look at the meeting for today, you have to do a second click in order to get all the detailed information about it. If you just click once, you just get the title and who's presenting. But if you click that link underneath, you will get her whole bio and all the rest of the detailed information. So thank you, Karen. I look forward to your presentation. I know this is a topic that many of us are really interested in, and thank you for presenting today.
Yes, I am so excited to be here and to present for you all. I am really passionate about playing and giving other people ways to play, new ways to play, not only professionals but also students. So now I will screen share. Yeah, okay, so large room music. What is large music? Chamber music, designed for small ensembles that are able to fit and play in smaller spaces. It's a social activity, and it's the music of friends. I kind of don't want to make this, you know, like a music history class because we all know what chamber music is, but just as, a little recap. Social activity. In a way, yes, it really is a social activity. It's a way for us to communicate musically through our instruments with other people, and the music of friends, right? We always, I feel like, have the best time playing with other people that are friends because we have so much more in common. And there's a special bond that we get when we all kind of get together, and you know that person personally as a friend, and then you also get to know them much more personally as a musician through the means of their instrument. Alrighty, so now let's talk about what happens when all these sounds collide when we make chamber music. I want to present quickly on 3 different pieces and kind of talk a little bit about them. So I'm going to talk about from the perspective of a violinist because that's what I know best, and my experience in having to work with other instruments and also different composers that what they bring to the table as a violinist that has to work with another instrument. So the first piece that we are going to look at, and please feel free to tell me if you're able to hear the audio of the pieces, we're going to be looking at Beethoven's Violin Sonata number 7 in C minor, opus 30, number 2. So first I'd like to point out when Beethoven wrote these now we call them violin sonatas. Actually, they're called sonatas for piano and violin. In my experience as the violinist, when I have to perform chamber works with piano, I never have as many notes as the piano does, and I always feel so bad for the pianists because they have so much more that they need to fill up than I do, and that's exactly that. Beethoven knew that, and he was like, okay, we got to make this a piano sonata. with violin. And that's exactly the case. And so I'm going to play the opening and then also the end, the finale of this. But before I play, I'd really want us to listen to the opening theme, specifically the articulation that the piano gives and the violin that responds to it. Beethoven is a super pianistic composer, which makes my life as the violinist challenging in a good way, and sometimes maybe not in a good way, because it does bring a challenge in playing. And so when I play chords, for example, we will hear in the opening, my chords have to sound exactly how the piano would play multiple notes at the same time. The articulation, the physical touch of the key and how you approach the key, I have to mentally process it the same way on my fingerboard, so it matches exactly. So the articulation as the violinist, because it is actually a piano sonata with violin, as the violinist, I have to modulate my sound to fit the piano. Also keeping in mind, when Beethoven wrote this, pianos were very, very different, and the way that they articulated themselves were very different than they do now. So if we go from the very beginning, I'd love for us to listen to the articulation that the piano introduces, and then how the violin responds. And specifically, I'm going to reinforce the word articulation. Please let me know if you're able to hear the audio. Alrighty, so that gives you a little taste, and then we're going to fast forward to the finale, which gives a closer look. Here we got to witness a lot of this articulation that is mimicked back and forth, and at the end even more so at a faster tempo. that was that first example. The second example, we're going to be looking at the Prokofiev Quintet, Opus 30, and the instrumentation of violin, viola, upright bass, double bass, clarinet, and oboe. And so when I'm performing this piece, or I'm playing it, or anyone, right now, instead of playing with the piano, I have to be really considerate about the wind players and how their playing abilities compare or differ to mine. So now I have to be much more aware of the breath, how long their breath, or what they got to do with their breathing, which we'll see in the very opening. And then also playing with the double bass and a viola, because the strings are thicker and they're bigger instruments, actually the tone production is a little delayed. So as a violinist, I have to be a little bit more aware and conscious of that. So my initial attack of the first note is actually going to be much faster than everyone else around me, because of the thickness of my strings and the way my instrument works and how it produces sound. So let's listen to this one now. So we get a little idea about that. And then the next piece that we'll be listening to is some Brahms. All three are very different composers. With Beethoven, focus on articulation. Prokofiev is, super colorful, texture-filled. And then Brahms is just so expansive and broad. And I feel like the Brahms, any of his violin sonatas, or any of his pieces, really, they show a totally different type of blend that I think no other composer really gets at, which when I'm playing with the piano and I'm playing Brahms, now instead of versus how it was with the Beethoven, I have to blend to the piano. I feel like with Brahms, it's a two-way street of the piano having to blend to the violin and then the violin having to blend to the piano, right? So in the Beethoven, if I use just a little bit too much vibrato, it would have not necessarily shattered the texture that Beethoven was going at and the articulation, but it would have made it stand out. Versus with Brahms is this very, passionate. So I have the advantage of using vibrato, which a piano doesn't. So my vibrato, when I enhance it, then the pianist can also imitate that in their own way through their playing. idea of kind of my kind of what goes on in my brain when I'm playing chamber music with piano or maybe not, or with other instruments. And then furthermore, a whole nother thing that to be super conscious of, right, is we as string players, we do this thing called pizzicato, which totally, it like diminishes the sound. Like it's so much more quieter than actually playing with the bow. So no matter who I'm playing with, to be conscious of making sure that my pizzicato is always heard when I'm playing with a piano, which is, the instrument is so much more massive than my little pluck, right? So they're just kind of getting into my brain space of what goes on when I'm playing with others. Now, having said all of that, I did not learn all these things about playing with different instruments or these different types of composers of what they need and what they require in their music just by going to class in music school. I learned it just through experience and getting to actually work with other musicians that have more chamber music experience than me, or some more knowledge that I don't. And because I got to work with them, I got to gain that knowledge because I got the opportunity to make music with them. In my case, as now an out-of-school professional musician that performs and teaches for a living, I have played with numerous people outside of school. And actually, I have encountered more musicians that don't necessarily have that awareness, which is no one's fault. But I think that maybe we can do something in this case where these young musicians that, aspire to be great one day, we can help them build that awareness so that, when they get hired for a gig and people enjoy playing with them because they are aware of these certain textural things, or, they know how to pay attention to other instrumentation around them, that they get hired back because they're good musicians, because they are aware and conscious of how to make music with others, with their instrument versus another instrument, and colliding their sounds. So I feel like in music school, which I'm so grateful for, I think music school puts a big emphasis on having a solo sound, which I think is great, and I think it is essential, but I think it is also essential to have that ensemble sound, to be able to blend with another person. So my history with, for example, accompanist, when I was an undergrad, I had the privilege of, in my violin studio, I had the privilege of having a studio accompanist. So this person, Vera Parkin, she's wonderful. She's in the St. Louis area. She would come in every single week for studio class, and she just knew all the major violin repertoire in her fingertips. So if you wanted to play a Beethoven sonata, Brahms sonata, Franck sonata, literally anything that you possibly want, she was able to do it. But that's just because of years of experience. But she also had that experience of knowing how to fit in the instrument with another violin, right? And also, through time, you get to learn about the specific person that is playing, right? So it's not only you have to fit inside the violin sound or work with the violin sound, you also have to, work with that person as me, right? Karen, that is playing that violin, right? So there's also that aspect. And I actually didn't know that a lot of schools didn't have like a studio accompanist. I was just so blessed to have one. So anytime I had any piece, I called Vera and I'm just like, here, Vera, let's go, And she was able to workshop with me and really create my own version of the piece that I wanted. And that really is what chamber music is. It's crafting what you want. It's not just two voices coming together and playing. Then when I went to grad school, that's when I realized how privileged I was, because there was no more studio accompanist. It was like, oh, you have a jury, you have a recital, you got to find your accompanist, pay them whatever, rehearse with them a couple times, and there you go, which is fine. However, the amount of accompanists that I worked with in grad school, that's kind of what I found I really lacked, was that just working together and trying to mold a sound together. It was just like, okay, and then also, there's also like a personality aspect to it as well, but it's okay, like let's make something out of this, right? It's like, oh, I hear you're slowing down here, let me also, or I see that you're changing the color here, I will also do that. Or, working together to do that, that's something that I really, really lacked. And going off of that, I also think I thought back on it, having a studio accompanist, like that would be a really great job. I feel like more music schools or studios should offer that if they can, if they have the budget. I think it's really beneficial for the studio, for the students in the studio, and also for, the accompanist that's there. It's an extra job for them, and also like they're learning the repertoire that they could, play anywhere else and take it on. Alrighty, so what happens after music school? I remember my first year out of school, even though throughout school I had, multiple jobs as a performer, as a teacher. So coming out of school, I still had those jobs. I continued them and I had more time to expand them. But still, like, I was lacking that chamber music aspect that I had for so long, for so many years. And I remember talking to one of my friends, who's a violist, and she lives in Connecticut right now. She teaches and plays there. And I remember just like, we were just talking about, and we used to be in a quartet at one point together. And I just remember talking to her and, we were just like, man, we just want to play with other people. Teaching is very fulfilling, doing these gigs, is fulfilling, but like just to like really play with others, create that like unified sound and playing around with color and texture. And what do we want to do here? There's something really fun and special about it. So yeah, I just want to play with others. I don't want to play just solo. I don't want to play just in an orchestra, right? And if we're being completely honest, like after school, 9 times out of 10, the most gigs, the most income that a musician will probably get is by doing chamber music. It's not by playing orchestra, and it's not going to be by playing solo, right? It's like someone wants a quick song to play at a choir concert, okay, they hire you, so then you have to play chamber music with the choir, someone wants you to, quickly do a quick performance of something, right? Or play at a wedding with an organist or something like that, right? That's all chamber music. And even as a violinist, which is like a big instrument in orchestra, compared to the amount of gigs I have of doing chamber music and orchestra, chamber music is way up there versus orchestra. So yeah, I think we can do a better job of just kind of preparing the future generation to make sure that when they do establish themselves as professional musicians, that yeah, they are really good musicians because they're able to not only verbally communicate well with the people around them and they're kind and sincere, but also they're able to communicate really well through their instruments and collaborate. So what can we as CAMTA do? I think we can get a wide range of members within CAMTA that are instrumentalists within multiple genres. And why multiple genres? Because that allows us to be constantly learning. So we can get musicians maybe that do tango. We can get musicians that maybe play Irish music. We can get members that could possibly, be in mariachi groups. Those are all genres that I have very limited knowledge about, but they exist. And the wider that our genres and knowledge get in other genres, right, the better musicians we get. I always like to think that, or I don't like to think I know, and I like to think back on it. I'm sure we all know the violinist Rachel Barton Pine, and I went to a master class recently with her, and, I asked myself, like, why is she so particularly so good at what she does? Like there's something about her playing compared to other also amazing violinists. Like why is it that she's just so her? Like she's just so good. And it finally clicked after a while because within these master classes, she kept on mentioning back to her previous experience of like playing in rock bands as a violinist, jazz, blues. It's because she has this wide spectrum of genres under her belt that she had the exposure to, and she brings them back into classical music, and her palette expands. And somehow, and it's not like a conscious thing that she's doing. She's not like, oh, I'm going to add a bluesy sound to this like Sibelius thing. That's probably not what she's thinking. She's just probably like a natural thing. So I think the more range of members that we can get into CAMTA, I think that'd be very, very cool. And yeah. So then the question is, how do we get these members? As my idea that I mentioned in the meeting, we can host sight reading chamber parties and get involved with these musicians in person. There's nothing better than going face to face with someone and communicating with them. And as musicians, we want to be able to play as much as possible. So I think this gives CAMTA an opportunity to give their members the chance to do so. Just like going back to my statement, what do we do like after we're done with school? It's like we just want to play with others. So like let's do it because we know so many people we can play with, so let's just do it. So what can we as CAMTA do? Part 2, we can create performance opportunities. And by doing that, we are getting the chance to network as individuals. And as CAMTA, we are spreading the word. We can give living composers the opportunity to have their works premiered by hosting performances and creating performance opportunities. When living composers hear about it, living composers are probably then thrilled to be like, oh my gosh, yes, let me write a piece because there's this group that, you know, does stuff like this, and you know, it's a win-win situation type of like that. We can provide musicians with the chance to just play with others. Like that is just so fun, and just share ideas. And then we can also expose ourselves and the audience to lesser known pieces, right? We can take on ourselves kind of like the Salver, how we were talking about it in the meeting, right? Exposing not only the children, but the audiences to pieces that aren't necessarily known. There's so much music in the world. We all know of the Beethoven, we all know of the Prokofiev, we all know of the Brahms, right? But there's so many other composers that would, you know, probably deserve that title as well, right? But like not a lot of people play their music. So as musicians that just want to play with others, let's play music that other people can hear. And such music consists of, and now I'm not sure if this will play, it probably won't, I have to go back to YouTube, but let me just do a short recap. So we will be listening to a short snippet of the Danny Elfman Piano Quartet. Danny Elfman is a film composer, actually, and this video is actually of me. I was in a piano quartet for quite a long time called the Emerald Piano Quartet up in Madison, Wisconsin, and we actually performed his piano quartet at a chamber music festival in Florida not too long ago. So we'll be hearing his piece. It's very, very fun. We will be listening to his second movement, which imitates children playing at the park. Oh, it's saying that my screen sharing is paused. Oh, there it goes. Okay, I'm going to start one more time. My apologies. Okay. Oh, I see some message. I'll continue with the audio just for a little bit more. that gives you a little preview of Danny Elfman. The next piece that we can possibly, I see that time is kind of going, but we have a violin sonata by Amanda Meyer, and she is actually a Swedish composer and violinist, and she is the first female ever to graduate from the Royal College of Music in Stockholm in 1872. That gives you a little sneak peek of Miss Amanda, and then also Paul Schoenfield cafe music. Schoenfield. Why? Piano drum. You can just listen to this bit. So that gives you a little sneak peek into that. Why? Okay. So by creating these opportunities, we can learn about all these different composers, pieces, and then also expand the audience's palette to them, which I think is super, super cool, right? Like lots of people know Danny Elfman for other reasons besides just a piano quartet. For example, Mahler also wrote a piano quartet, but like no one knows about it, and it's one of the most beautiful things ever. Everyone also associates Mahler with like his grand symphonies, right? But there's also other works that he wrote that the world, I think, should know about. So moving on. So CAMTA in the future. This is something that I have been pondering on, going back to having this young generation when they get to these professional musician roles, when they go into this professional life, that they do get hired again for their skills and their knowledge, and there are ways to collaborate. There are good ways to collaborate. I think as an idea, it would be wonderful if CAMTA could possibly in the future create a chamber music workshop for young musicians. It could be, this is just very hypothetical, but a 3-day long program. Multiple instrumentalists can come. It can be, age group can be discussed, but young musicians, that have a certain ability on their instruments. Each student can be assigned into a chamber group, and they get coaching for 2 days, and then on the final day, they have their concert with their chamber group that they formed. This provides young musicians a chance to gain chamber music experience, network, and sneak peek into the music world. I remember my first music workshop, kind of very similar to this. I did, I don't even know how long ago, but it was similar in this way. And at that time, I actually played viola, which was a different part of my life. But as a violist, it really gave me a sneak peek into kind of like, oh, like this is really cool. I get to make ideas. My idea and my skills on my instrument actually are valued and mattered. Like I can speak up about it, like maybe we can retard a little bit more here, or take time here, or, hold this note a little bit longer, right? It really gave me a sense of like, oh, I actually, it gave me validation of like, I do have some knowledge on my instrument, even though I'm young. Like I do kind of know something, and I want to share and see if other people agree with it or not. And then we made music together. And so by networking also, like these children that are, taking lessons and things like that, I think that one of the biggest motivations that they have is their peers. But if they're only taking lessons and they're only going to lessons once a week and doing certain events a couple times a year, right? That's great, but also, what if because of this chamber music workshop, they meet a friend and they get their number, and then they text each other and they become practice buddies, right? They become practice buddies, and they keep each other in check throughout the week. It's building that network and that communication with other like-minded musicians of their age. So I think it's really important, and they inspire each other. And then also, with the coaches, the coach being, that could be discussed, but, members from CAMTA like myself or something, I think there's literally nothing better and more inspiring than watching your teacher do their thing and talking about, what they're passionate about, and showing their knowledge, whether it's through performance or coaching or teaching or something. I think it's one of the biggest inspirations ever. So I think that's something that CAMTA could do in the future. And yeah, chamber music is an essential part in our lives, no matter what instrument we play, or kind of what we do in music, whether if we're performing in chamber music or writing for a chamber group, or programming for, a concert. That is all technically chamber work. It's all collaboration. It's melding of ideas and sounds. And if we can fit in a large space and create music, let's just do it, because at the end of the day, like we just want to play with others, as I said, one of the quotes when we leave music school. So that is that is my presentation.
Thank you so much, Karen. This has been very inspiring. I remember experiences that I had when I was growing up, playing duets with friends. And once I got out of college, I also met somebody who loved chamber music, and he used to invite a group of us over to his house every New Year's Day, and we would play through chamber music. It was so much fun. And he moved away, and I miss it. So I hope that we're able to do something like this with CAMTA. I think it would be really fun for our students. And thank you for inspiring us in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's one of those things where, orchestra is like too big, solo is like, you're just by yourself. But like with chamber, there's so much that you can do with it. And it affects so many people, and it's so malleable in the sense of size and space and where it could be done and things like this. And I think yes, Chicago has a really big music scene in general, teaching scene, everything. But I think we can take advantage of the fact that because it is so malleable, I think CAMTA could take advantage of it and kind of use it to their advantage of the fact that we, as the members, can take part of it and expose CAMTA through chamber music. And then also like our students, like I said, see us doing it. They're like, oh, that's really cool. My teacher's doing XYZ, blah, 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 blah. And also like with these students attending these performances, right? They're not only exposing themselves to this different types of music, but also like they're learning concert etiquette, right? And by a concert etiquette, I mean like not sitting on your phone, right? But the more they do it, the more they get better at it, and also like the more attentive they are, they're focused, and then they can go back home and maybe apply it to their own work, right? They could talk about it. I remember I sent a video. I did a performance of a Florence Price piece in grad school, and I sent it over to one of my students actually, that is African American, and it was actually in February for Black History Month. And I had no idea that she was so inspired by it that she took on Florence Price at school, and she made that her research project for the month because of this video that I just sent her, right? And the video that I sent her was just pure chamber music, right? So it's little things like that where the kids, they see it and it's up to them what they do with it. And hopefully what they do with it is they take it on into the world. So she presented on Florence Price at school in her 4th grade class, and then now her whole class got exposed to Florence Price just because I decided to send her a link, right? So it's one of those things that just slowly, spreading the word of these pieces and these people. And yeah, chamber music is a blessing, and I think we should take advantage of it.
Yeah, I agree. And Emmy Murata did this amazing presentation of piano trios at all different levels. So she should be contacted. Yeah, and we just might also draw in more musicians than just pianists in CAMTA as
Yeah,
one aspect of it too.
that's something that I think it can really, I guess, boost in that sense, right? Because like I said, chamber music, there's so much of it that and especially with different genres and things like this, learning how to teach fiddle music, or like I can't even begin to comprehend that because it's totally out of my realm and it's so complicated. But bringing just other people with different skills and knowledge that we can learn from, whether it's through their genre or through their instrument, right? Like I said, I only know violin, right? So that's the only thing I can speak about. But there's so much more that I don't know. And no matter how long I go to school for, I'm probably not going to learn everything because that's just impossible, right? You learn the most from experience and through the people that you meet and work with. So, yeah.
We should also perhaps talk to some of the teachers. The music teachers of Hyde Park, I believe, have a chamber music day. And we might be able to get some ideas of how they organize that and
That's
how we
right.
might do something like that at CAMTA.
I was thinking about that, but I think it was more of a concerto day. where the pianists learn a
I,
concerto.
I
Is
think
that
they
it?
have both.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting ready to catch a train. So I'm traveling to Minneapolis by Amtrak, and I'm thrilled about having
Oh,
7 hours of pure peace